Hungary, a member of the European Union since 2004, is undergoing a dramatic shift in its foreign policy. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, the country is increasingly turning toward Russia and China, moving away from the EU's core values and policies. This shift, which includes Hungary aligning itself with the BRICS nations, raises important questions about its future relationship with the EU, NATO, and the global order. Historically, Hungary has been seen as a loyal EU member, but Orbán's government has increasingly challenged the Union's foundational principles. Hungary's pivot is driven by a belief that the EU is overreaching, particularly in its criticism of Hungary's domestic policies on issues like its judiciary and media. A growing sense of nationalism and resistance to the EU's progressive agenda is evident among many Hungarians, as public support for the EU has fallen sharply from around 80% a decade ago to just 47% in recent surveys. As tensions with Brussels escalate, Hungary is seeking new alliances, particularly with Russia and China, to secure its sovereignty and economic interests. One of Hungary's most notable moves has been joining China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRICS, making it the first EU member to do so. The BRICS, an infrastructure and investment project, ties participating countries more closely to China's economic and geopolitical interests. Hungary has also strengthened its trade relations with Russia, despite EU sanctions in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Hungary continues to rely on Russian energy, with about 85% of its gas imports coming from Russia, even as the rest of the EU has attempted to reduce dependency on Russian resources. Orbán's government argues that Hungary must prioritize energy security over EU sanctions, a stance that puts Hungary at odds with the broader EU position. Hungary's increasing ties with Russia and China go beyond trade, they signal an ideological shift. Hungary's support for Russia's energy policies and its reluctance to back EU military aid for Ukraine have raised concerns in Europe. Hungary's opposition to Sweden's NATO membership, due to Sweden's criticism of Hungary's democratic practices, further complicates Hungary's relationship with NATO and EU allies. This divergence in foreign policy raises the question of whether Hungary is acting strategically to assert its sovereignty or whether it is simply being used as a pawn in a larger geopolitical game. Hungary's alliance with China, in particular, carries significant risks. By becoming a key partner in China's Belt and Road Initiative, Hungary is positioning itself as an important link between Europe and Asia. Chinese investments in Hungary have surged, with over $1 billion directed into infrastructure, transportation, and energy. While these investments promise short-term economic benefits, critics warn that Hungary could become too reliant on China, giving Beijing leverage over Hungarian domestic and foreign policy. The long-term effects of this relationship could undermine Hungary's autonomy within the EU. Hungary's shift also signals broader global trends. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are emerging as a counterbalance to Western-dominated institutions. The BRICS bloc is expanding, with countries like Argentina, Egypt, and Iran expressing interest in joining. BRICS nations now account for about 31% of global GDP, and their economic influence is growing. Hungary's alignment with BRICS places it at the center of this shifting global order, with potential benefits in trade, investment, and access to new markets. However, this also poses risks, particularly if Hungary's economic future becomes too intertwined with Chinese and Russian interests. Hungary's shift toward BRICS also challenges the EU's unity. The EU has always been defined by collective action and shared values, but Hungary's actions threaten to fracture this unity. If Hungary's move away from the EU is seen as a trend, other member states may reconsider their own positions, potentially leading to a rethinking of the EU's role in global politics. Countries like Poland and Italy are already showing signs of euroscepticism, mirroring Hungary's growing disillusionment with the EU. This could spark a broader political shift within the EU, weakening its cohesion and making it more difficult for the Union to present a unified front on global issues. Hungary's growing dependence on China and Russia presents both opportunities and challenges. While trade with these countries could bring economic benefits, the risks of becoming overly reliant on them are significant. Hungary's growing ties with BRICS could provide immediate economic opportunities, but it could also lead to political isolation from the EU. The EU could impose sanctions or trade barriers in response to Hungary's growing ties with non-EU countries, which could damage Hungary's long-term economic prospects. As Hungary deepens its engagement with the East, the country is at a crossroads. Orbán's government has made it clear that it will not compromise on issues like energy security and military support, even if it means distancing itself from EU policies. Hungary's decisions in the coming years will define its role in global geopolitics and determine whether it will be a bridge between East and West or an outlier within the EU. This shift has broader implications for Europe's political landscape and may contribute to a rethinking of alliances within the EU and beyond. Ultimately, Hungary's foreign policy shift reflects broader global trends and could have lasting consequences for European and global politics. The EU now faces a challenge: how to respond to a member state that is moving away from its core values and policies. Hungary's alignment with China and Russia may provide economic benefits in the short term, but the long-term risks could be significant, both for Hungary and the EU. The future of Europe's political cohesion and the global order could be shaped by how Hungary navigates its new alliances.